Welcome to Olmsted Overheard, the place for real conversations about what's happening in and around Olmsted Falls, Ohio. I'm your host, Mark McCausland. As part of my election coverage, I'm speaking with candidates in their own words, and today we have Garry Thompson, a candidate for council at large here in Olmsted Falls. Garry is a lifelong Olmsted Falls resident and small business owner of TNS Power Equipment. Garry has already served a decade on city council, including a time as council president, and currently sits on the Planning and Zoning Commission. He's also been active across many different organizations in town, and in our conversation, we dig into Garry's view of smart growth and intentional city planning. We get into some of the hot button topics here in town, like housing developments, traffic, trains, parking, recreation opportunities, and the case for falls and township collaboration, including the history of attempts at joining the two together. Garry has a huge wealth of insight into the modern history of our town, so if you want to learn about these topics from somebody who has actual experience with them, I strongly encourage you to listen in. And real quick note, our conversation was rather long, so I did condense it down to fit into a nice podcast episode. And with that, I had to organize some of the content together. Because of that, there are times where you will hear a small transition sound where relevant. So let's get into it. This is Olmsted Overheard. First, I just want to say welcome to Garry Thompson. Garry is running for council at large here in Olmsted Falls. Thank you so much for being here. And we're just going to open it up, Garry, with you giving us a background on you, who you are, how'd you end up in Olmsted Falls, general background stuff. I'll turn it over to you.
All right. First of all, it's a pleasure to be on your podcast, Mark. Glad I could take part in this. I'm actually a generation resident here. My grandparents were here. On both sides of the family, which is highly unusual. My dad's grandparents were here on the south side of the tracks. I don't know if that makes any difference.
Yeah.
And my mom's parents were on the north side of the north track off on Water Street. So both my parents graduated from Olmsted Falls, and my dad, they built a house here on Columbia Road, just across the street from what's now Uncle John's. At that time, it was United Greenhouses. And so I grew up not far from there on a little private street that goes back about 500 feet. We had the Plum Creek in our backyard, and it was a great place to grow up. Back then, it was known as the Old Westview, before Westview and Olmsted Falls, Village of Olmsted Falls combined. So I have a lot of history in that regard. I graduated from Olmsted Falls in 1975 and went through the entire school system, as has my son. He grew up here also. And ultimately, we ended up starting a business here. It wasn't our original plan. We had looked at Strongsville, we'd looked at Medina, Berea, all kinds of different places. And then one of Clint Williams' realtors called me up and said, "Hey, I got this place down here on Sprague Road, and would you be interested in looking at it?" And so we did. It was like 100 mice running all over the place. So it was one of the best sales pitch, but it was what we needed. It was in the commercial zoned area, and we just kind of took over from there. It was, interestingly enough, one of my cousins on my grandfather's side had actually used the house at one point for a real estate office. So it's kind of, I guess, maybe keeping it in the family. I don't know. Anyways, from there, we started our business fixing small engines. I could start in the garage, and we've grown that. We currently employ a little under 20 people. We've added buildings and added property over the years as it became available. And right now I'm moving into semi-retirement. So I'm a native grown son, I guess, as they say.
What's the name of the business?
Initially, we called it TNS Mower Service, because at that time we were pretty much just doing mowers. This is 45 years ago, 46 now. And now it's called TNS Power Equipment. It's evolved into a whole lot of stuff: trimmers, chainsaws, any type of thing you think with a small engine. And now that's evolving into a lot of product with obviously battery and being electrified. So business is evolving, changing. We'll see where it goes. That's the future.
Are you guys still in the same original location?
Yes, we are. So
awesome.
Yeah, we've been fortunate enough to be able to, acquire the property next door. They were originally going to build a bank there, and they didn't. So we were able to get an acre next to the third acre that we had. And so we're right next to now it's a mobile station on the corner of Columbia and Sprague.
Very cool. Thanks for sharing the background there. what led you to decide to run for council at large here? Do you have any background in Olmsted Falls politics at all?
I've been the president of just about every organization in the community. I got involved at an early age. Once I got out of high school with the JCs, which was an organization that was for young people between the ages of 18 and 35. 35, they kicked you out. So I was able to get involved in that. And they had a lot of leadership development programs that they offered, which was really neat. And I was also blessed with receiving the highest award that they offered, which is a senatorship award for my leadership abilities and different skills that I acquired through them. From there, I've been in numerous different positions with Olmsted Kiwanis and was the president there in 2001, 2002. Also was instrumental in we formed the Chamber of Commerce back in the early 1980s with actually a number of business owners from the local area, Bob Smart and a couple other guys. And then I came in and we formalized it. It was just a business association. Dr. Kreiner and he was the president, and then I became the president. He was the superintendent of schools at the time. And then we actually formed it into an actual Chamber of Commerce at that point, because the people recognize that it's a more formal organization, and you kind of become part of a much larger organization at that point. From there, I was the chairman of our parish council along the St. Mary of the Falls. They had started a parish council. I led that for 5 of the 6 years. What got me into the politics was, before I ran for office, I was instrumental in getting the JED, which is a Joint Economic Development District, created. At that time, it's kind of similar to today. There was a lot of building going on, and not so much in the falls, it was in the township. I mean, they were building anywhere between 150 and 200 homes a year. And there were some zoning issues township was working through, but when you own the property and it's owned by a development company or whatever, you can do certain things and you have the ability to force certain things if you need to. Falls Point and Woodgate Farms and all those areas, those were all being built. There were some other areas that were being developed. The schools at that time were very interested in assisting us with that effort, because when you start putting in that many homes that quickly, it places a burden on the school district. So, and obviously on all the residents then, because they start adding more people, they need new buildings, they need new teachers, they need a lot more things. And obviously that means taxes are going to increase. So we were able to put together a 250-acre parcel, basically, 4 major landowners out by the Stearns, Fitch, Cook area, Bradley, Barton Road. There's about 250 acres there that we're able to do a joint economic development district with the township that, number one, it prevents homes from being built, because first of all, it's zoned industrial, but secondly, JED overlaps that, and you cannot have a house within the JED district. So, I don't know how many homes you could put in there now. I easily estimate over 1,000 if you just put 4 per acre. And the way they're building homes again, I mean, the market it's juiced up again. And as you see, I mean, they're building a lot of homes. There's 500 more coming into the falls probably over the next 5 years. This was one way to help control some of that. It was also another way for an increase in tax dollars, because it allows the township to impose an income tax equal to the city's tax, which is 1.5%. And then those tax dollars are used to develop the property for the infrastructure and that type of thing, pay back the debt that has to be incurred to do that. But following that, once that debt's paid, the rest of that money comes back to the 2 government entities. So the falls and the township will each then split any extra monies after the debt's paid, goes back to the coffers of both of those communities. It's also a way to, at some point, you'll have revenue coming off of those properties, but it's just looking to the future. When that, and it's very close to being developed now. The infrastructure is all in place, and there's been a lot of interest. There's actually been some applications made, purchases of the property to be developed. Something will probably happen it's been 20 years. We did that in 2001. Okay. Probably within the next 5 years, I think you're going to see something, a fairly large corporation move on to that property. So
for commercial
industrial. We would prefer, I mean, we're not looking for a bunch of warehouses, but obviously you'd want to have some office space and that type of thing. What I've learned in the 10 years in politics is the old NIMBY thing, not in my backyard. Everybody wants business to lower taxes, but nobody Nobody wants it in their backyard. Yeah, I don't want to buy it. Put it somewhere else. And so,
Right.
And then after that, at the request of some folks that were on city council and the mayor at that time, they asked if I would run for Ward 4, which is down in the area where I'm at, on the southern part of town, the old Westview section. So I did. I ran for Ward 4 council. I did have a good opponent, and so competition is good. We're still friends today, so that was the really good part. She lives in the same development, so I won that election. I was that for 3 terms. Council terms were only 2 years instead of 4. And so then I ran for council at large, and then was council at large and then council president. And that's elected by council. So I was elected council president for the last 2 terms. So I spent 5 terms and total in office, 10 years through the 2000s. At that point, lost an election, don't remember the year exactly. And so at that point, I just went back and been working in the business and trying to move that forward and still paying close attention. I was able to get a seat on the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Okay.
Which is critical because anything or any possible things coming into the city usually need to go through that board or are reviewed by that board. I don't chair that board. We have a very capable chairman in Brett Iafiola. And actually, we have a very good board right now. A lot of newer young people, and they have a very vested interest in seeing the community develop and grow. I mean, I've done a lot of other things in the meantime. I chaired the Bicentennial Committee, celebrating the founding 1803 of both communities. I was on our Charter Review Committee 10 years ago now. I chaired that. So just different leadership positions. At that time, we did change the election schedule so that now if there's more than 2 people running for mayor, they have to file earlier than council. And so let's say there were 3 or 4 people running, more than 2, there would be a primary in September. And then we'd have the final election in November, where prior to that, you would, if somebody didn't get 50% of the vote in November, then there was a runoff in December. And everybody, why are we doing this? And nobody understood it. No, that's what our charter says. And that's how it was set up. So that was one of the main things that we accomplished, was getting that changed. We tried to change the council terms because right now, all 7 members of council are up for re-election at the same time. And normally that doesn't happen, but we've had instances where, I mean, technically all 7 you could have 7 new council members and that have never had any council experience or anything. And I just don't think that's a good way to do it. But that's
no business would run themselves that way, right? Like you think about business continuity.
Yeah, you need to have something. So, and you're limited by outside entities too. The Board of Elections and things, certain elections have to take place on certain years and that type of thing. So the only way that you can make that happen is to go to 4-year terms, because it has to be every 2 years, the way their schedule runs. And then the way we had it structured is the council at large terms would be up 1 year, and then the ward terms would be up 2 years after that. So at no point in time would you have a higher turnover than 4 members of council. So you'd always have continuity.
But that's not how it's structured, right? Like that was all theoretical.
Yeah. So I'm guessing that'll probably come up again, but I don't know. I just saw that the city's looking for anybody in the community that's interested in being on the Charter Review Committee. That's a good place to start, because you really get to see some of the inner workings. And basically, you're just looking at the charter. The charter is kind of the Bible of how the city operates. Quick story was, when I got on council and, my first years, I would go to the mayor, why can't we do this? And why can't we do this? He goes, go read your charter. I thought he was just being smart, So I went back and read the charter and you can't do that because the charter says, and it's not easy to change the charter. It'd be like changing our Constitution. It's not easy to change for a reason, but at the same point, it's important that it's not that easy to change, and the citizens have to vote on it. It's not something that, council can say, hey, let's change this or let's change that. No, it has to be done by the community, and that's a good thing. I don't think that's
for sure.
I think it's good.
But to your point, most people don't know how the process works. Most people don't know about the charter and how that really dictates a lot of things. And even speaking for myself, right? Like I've been volunteering on Parks and Rec board for several years now, and that was my first exposure to any of that, right? And there are times that a board member on Parks and Rec will say, well, why can't we do this? And it's like, well, if you go look at our charter, what we're supposed to do is very limited to these things. And so it's very interesting. And my drive with this podcast and other things is that knowledge gap is something that I just continually see right? You see people go on Facebook and say they want this, they want that. How can it possibly be that everybody's saying they want this, but why is it still happening this way? And I kept seeing this, and I was like, I teach software to people for my job, and so it's taking relatively complex things and dumbing it down so people can digest it and apply it. It's like I want to start doing some of that for this city stuff, and that was my initial drive. But then election season, and so the podcast has been largely focused on that. But I intend to get into more of those sorts of breakdowns after election season's done.
You know, I look at Facebook every now and then too, and you're absolutely right. There's a lack of understanding of how all that works. There's also some bad information that's out there too. So
yeah.
And the way the government's really set up is we have a strong council, weak mayor form of government. Hasn't always operated in that manner, but that's really how it's structured. I mean, that's why I ran. I mean, I know that was one of your questions, but I had a number of people call me and they really wanted me to run for mayor. And when I was council president before, the mayor kept me informed of everything that was going on. And I commend him for that, in case he goes, hey, something happens to me, you need to know why I'm doing what I'm doing and that type of thing. And I thought that was admirable.
And that, just as a small point of clarification for anybody else listening, right? That is the official succession. We don't have a vice mayor. So if the mayor were to have to step down for one reason or another, the council president would fill in.
Yeah. And even if the mayor's on vacation and he's out of town someplace, he usually executes a letter before he leaves naming the council president as mayor in his interim, so that if something, the catastrophe or something would happen, that chain of command, it's there. And it was usually just a memo or something like that, but it was always notified that, hey, I'm going to be out and you're the guy. So I guess in some ways, technically, I've been the mayor.
At least acting.
Nothing happened. It's like, I would always tease the mayor. I would say, my job is to keep you healthy. So, stop smoking, stop doing this, you better eat better. I was always teasing him like that, but there was a lot of truth in that too. But I was fortunate. No, I never had to step into an emergency or anything like that. And usually, obviously today with technology, even if he's not physically there, he's usually available, or she is available to contact and say, hey, let's talk this over. Here's what's going on. And what do you think we should do, type of thing. We're fortunate to have that technology in existence today. And then we could execute from there. So since we're going to have a new mayor, it's just all the other connections and other things in the charter itself. I don't have it memorized, but I have it pretty well down.
You know where to look.
And I know where to look.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I know exactly where to look. I have copies of it everywhere, because that's the first thing you have to go back to. What does the charter say and who's authorized to do what? And that's how the governments operate. And that's kind of why I decided to step in. So I'll try to assist where I can. At the end of 2 years, I think the mayor's got everything under control, and somebody else wants to step up into the council at-large seat or whatever, I'm okay with stepping down. If I determine at that point I need another term, I will do that. But I'm not looking at this as a permanent job opportunity. So unlike our congressmen and senators, but unfortunately, but obviously my roots are here. So it's kind of like, I love the community. I love what we do. I love what it's about. And I just, I want to see it continue to grow and properly. You're not going to stop the growth. Everybody would like to. Everybody wants to keep it, the same as it was, when I grew up 50 years ago. But at that time, there was only about 4,000 residents in the city. Today, there's a little over, right around 9,000. And
that's what I thought.
The township's got 16. And I think that's, when I was on council before, we were trying to do a study on the potential combination of both the falls and the township. And there was a lot of controversy. We had a very good commission, and it went to the ballot.
And how long ago was this?
That was, oh my gosh, it had to be in the 2000s, early 2000s. Well, there's been numerous different ones. I mean, when the village of Falls and the village of Westview combined, at that time, the township had an opportunity to do that too, and they opted not to. So that's how the city of Olmsted Falls came to be, because you needed like 5,000 residents to become a city at that time. So combining the village of Westview and the village of Olmsted Falls gave you that number that you needed to then become a city. Before that, they were both villages. The township still retained its same form of government. That was done 72 is when I think the vote was officially. I think it started like 74. I was still in high school. I graduated 75. So that's when Westview ceased to exist and the city of Olmsted Falls came into being. Somewhere around, I guess, the 80s, early 90s, there was another vote to do a merger and the falls passed, the township failed it. And it usually boils down to taxes. We have RETA taxes in Olmsted Falls, and it's an income tax, and the township doesn't have that. But then in our last attempt, and I'm going to say it was in the mid-2000s, it passed everywhere except for one precinct, which happened to be the mobile home park down on Columbia Road. And ultimately, the whole process failed by 91 votes. My memory is correct. Yeah, it was very close. And that was basically just to do a study. We had CSU lined up at that time to do the study. We had a grant from the county that would pay for the study, because once that passes, you're under time constraints. So certain things have to happen. You need to, what would it look like? What would the tax structure be? What would the government structure be? Because you have a number of different there's like 3 different options that you can choose. It doesn't have to be a mayor council. It could be a mayor, city manager, and council. It could even be like the commissioners, like we had years ago, kind of like the township government, but more in order with the county government at that time. Probably still the most efficient is probably still a mayor council. I think the people are better represented that way, but that's but that's to be determined. That's what the study would do.
The study would initiate those exploratory topics. Ultimately, then it would again need to be voted on to make anything official.
Correct. It was a 2-step process, but the study itself failed. And a part of it was the language. And we went down to the Board of Elections. The problem is the state of Ohio had it said this is what it has to say. Now, since then, that has changed. After we pleaded our case, we took it back down to the State House, and they changed the way that was worded, because it wasn't worded like it was doing a study. When people read what it said, they thought they were actually voting on the merger itself. And I think that turned some people off. And we had some negativity also. I mean, obviously, the interesting thing about that was the biggest objection that I got from the township people was I can't shoot my gun and I can't ride my horse. We wouldn't have changed any of that. That wasn't our goal. And as far as shooting the gun, I said, well, voice your opinion if that happens, and that may still be allowable. I don't know. I said, that's something we'd have to work out. So but it didn't happen. I know that there's another move afoot, kind of, I won't call it underground, but there's a number of residents that are looking to resurrect that. So especially in light of the announcement of having a joint economic development district with North Olmsted over at the corner of Stearns and Bagley, that has kind of fired that up a little bit.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's a great segue into some of the more formal questions I can ask, because I think we organically touched on a lot of these things. But what would you say are the biggest issues that the town of Olmsted Falls faces right now?
Yeah, there's a couple things, and that's part of why I decided to run for office. Financially, we're back in good position, because that was my biggest concern for 8 years ago. We when I left office, we had about $1.8 million in the bank, which sounds like a lot, but it's not.
No, not for a city. It's not.
Not for the size of the budget we have. That would have gotten us about 2 or 3 months if a disaster happened. So right now we're a little over 3.5, maybe, I don't know, we're 4 million right now, but I do follow that. And so we have about a 6-month cushion. We were in the red section on the state's list of possibility of going bankrupt. So the mayor's done a great job of bringing that back. Taxes, obviously, is probably that's the complaint I hear the most, although in reality, our taxes are fairly low compared to surrounding communities. But, it's still on everybody's mind. And the lack of business, there's really not a whole lot of new business. Now, some of the new developments that are taking place are in an area called multiple use traditional neighborhood, which requires a 10% carve out for commercial and any type of commercial business. So part of my position sitting on the Planning and Zoning Commission has been, there was one place we decided to mitigate that and not do that because the property didn't really lend itself to that, and it would have changed the complexion of the neighborhood on Columbia Road, not too far from you. But the one further down, when we did Schuster's Greenhouse, that has a 5-acre parcel, and there's a sign there right now for business. So that'll bring in some new business. There's one across from that that's just going to be starting, and there's only about 30 homes going into that, and that still has a provision for 10% of that land to have commercial business. And the same is true with the one on Maple Way, between Maple Way and Fitch. Initially, that was all I-2, which was industrial zoning, and I hated to see that go to an MUT&D district, but we didn't have any say over that, and that came out of a lawsuit that got settled in the subsequent administration. So that was part of the zoning change that the city agreed to. So now that's going to end up with, I think it was, I'm going to say there's 285 homes. But that was also something when the smokestack trails went in, or is going in, that's in 3 phases. The first phase is like 64 single family dwellings. The last phase back by the river will be townhouses. That hasn't been approved yet. That's what's been proposed. We approved phases 1 and 2. The Schuster's property, the greenhouse property, Falls Landing, is a Petros development, and that they proposed all townhomes. Now, we had asked that the density be changed when we did smokestack trails. We asked council to change the density because at that time, the density, you could build up to 7 dwelling units per acre, which we thought was a little excessive. We did get that dropped down to 5. Council did agree with that and was able to make that change, but then they proposed all townhomes. Well, the code didn't say that they couldn't do that. It just said they could develop up to 5 homes per acre or 5 dwelling units per acre. So there wasn't much we could do. Their proposal met all the criteria of the code, so we were kind of locked in there. So then our board approached council again and said, hey, we need to change this so that there's a blend of single family versus townhomes. So we're not creating, a townhome city, because most of the city is obviously single family homes. So we need to try to keep that balance as much as possible. So that we were able to do that then with the one that's on the west side of Columbia. That's actually going to be all single family dwellings. And that's only about 30 some units. And then the Maple Way project, those will be a blend. And they'll build all the single family homes first. And then they'll do the townhouses are going to be over on the other side of Minnie Creek, which is towards the town, off towards the Fitch Road side. So that's in 3 phases also. So they kind of, I think they were trying to mitigate that. The drawings and things they showed didn't have any commercial. And we raised the question, and then they kind of threw it in the corner. Although there are some commercial uses that would fit for where they want to put it. And actually, that's in the minutes of our meetings, to say that, hey, look, when you finish your phase 1 and 2, before we approve phase 3, we want to see some activity on the commercial development of that property. So you're not just going to, run over us. They'll take a while. It depends on what the market does, depends on what mortgage rates do, all that kind of stuff. But all that's out of our control. But we are trying to control the things that we can control. And part of that was having some of that land for commercial use. So they can't develop it all into homes. There's 10% of that property that's still set aside for commercial use. See how that plays out. It's one thing for our board to say, this is what we want to see, but then somebody has to hold their feet to the fire to make sure it happens that way.
Yeah.
And that's part of what we need to do in the community. For the last several years, we did not need much of a building department. We have a part-time building inspector, and that's pretty much all we needed. Well, now with over 500 homes being built, that's the thing that's lacking. When I was on council before, we had a full-size professional building department, and that's lacking today. So we don't have that. And I'm not suggesting we go out and hire a lot of people, but there are some things we could do. My option is to work with the township, who now does have a full-size building department. Say, hey, look, guys, you got it. You got 5 people over there that's what they do because of the building that you guys have been doing. And is there a way we can contract with you to do our inspections? The example that I use, we don't like private streets because private streets have become nothing but a hassle for people that live on them. When you get to 3rd or 4th ownership and the road's falling apart and their HOA is like, well, we don't have any money to do the street. And they come to the council meeting and, well, we want you to take over our street. Like, well, no, we're not taking over the street. That's how it was designed. That's how it was put in. It's a private street. You guys have to do it. So we are very cautious about everything we've done has been public streets. Now, I can't tell you that the streets that are being put in as they should be. I'm assuming they are, but I don't know that. And at some point, they're going to be dedicated over to the city. And I guess I want to make sure that they are built to city standards and they are built with the proper concrete and proper depth and proper fill and whatever else you have to do to build that street properly, so that we're not inheriting a big problem later down the road.
Interesting. So is that oversight happening at all right now?
I can't say that I've been told that there's somebody from the engineering firm on site, but I don't know. I can't tell you unequivocally that,
Well, but from the city side, like, is the city doing anything to make sure that these things are being built accordingly, or is it all just kind of happening and then?
I think it's happening, and I'm not sure that I'm not confident, let's put it that way, that it's being inspected and done to city standards throughout the whole process. An example that I can give is our chairman drove down Smokestack Trails. Well, part of the code, and it's not something we impose, but part of the code says that 25% of the face of the home has to have masonry on it. In other words, it's got rock, or,
Sure.
It doesn't have to be like fake rock, but it's rock, it's not vinyl. It can't be vinyl. It has to be actual masonry. And so he drove down there. Well, there's a bunch of them down there that don't have any rock on them at all. They're all vinyl.
Oh.
And so that's not keeping with the code. Well, whose fault is it? The builder says, well, we sent the plans to you guys and you approved them. We built it that way. But is that the case? But it's something as simple as that, our code says this, and yet they're not being built to those standards. So that's kind of where I think there's a disconnect right now, especially with all this building that's taking place. And I'm not faulting our part-time building inspector, because there's only so much he can do. And he's full-time in another city. And so you could argue, hey, well, it's not a big deal, but you still have laws and you still have codes that you need to uphold.
For sure.
If nobody goes to the developer or the builder and said, this is how you have to do it, and this is what our code says, they'll do whatever they want to do. That's what our concern is. And from our position on the commission, we don't have that authority. We can put things to protect the city and the residents and that kind of thing in our motions and what we pass, but somebody has to enforce those. If nobody enforces them, then enough people just do what they want to do. And that's where I think we need to shore some things up. The other thing is sidewalks. The city requires sidewalks to be put in on any of the developments, but what we have right now is a lot of different developments that have been built over different time periods, but none of them are connected together. The township's been successful in getting several grants, and I think there is grant money available. We can probably certainly apply for that and try to even work with them on areas where we can. Because what I do know in government is if you have a combination of 2 or 3 cities, villages, townships, whatever, that come together, that you're on a point system. The more people you have collaborating together, the more points you get. We could do things with them or somebody else, whatever, that helps us out in getting some of those things. But the proposal that I'd like to put out there, and I know Chad's kind of already run with it to the finance director and the law director, is we have a thing called inside millage that the city has, and it just allows you to be able to, there's a certain tax that every city can collect, and we collect it. Just like every other city does, but it can be used for different things. Well, one of the things we have is we have a shade tree commission, and so there's a levy. You pay it when you pay your taxes. A small percentage of it goes to the shade trees, which go out in the tree lawn. And then we also have a street lighting thing, because CEI charges us for powering the lights, but they maintain them and take care of them. And that way, when you drive down Columbia Road or any of the developments that all have street lights, you can see where you're going. And and it's a small fee. If you look at it, everybody probably pays like $1 a month for it or something. It's not much.
Right.
And I think we could do the same thing with their sidewalks, because most people don't know that they're responsible for the sidewalks in front of their property
until they get told that they have to fix it.
Yeah. But it's in the city's right of way. So the city has the right of way to come in there and tear it out if they wanted to. But so I always found that kind of, mysterious of why is it that way? So I haven't checked out a lot of other communities. There are communities that do it, because obviously the law director and finance committee director knew that there's out there. I'd want to do a little more investigative work on it, but I think there's a way that it could be done. So, even if it's a small budget, even if it's $50,000 or $100,000, that you could be used primarily initially to connect all these pieces of sidewalks together. The city would contract that out, have it done. And then also for the people that already have sidewalks, that if your sidewalk buckled because a tree did something else, whatever, that then it would be the city's responsibility to to maintain it and fix it, just like we do with the roads, instead of the homeowner's responsibility. That way it kind of benefits everybody, and everybody's putting money into the pot. So maybe your sidewalks are fine, but you have them, but if something goes wrong, we're going to take care of them. And then somebody else that doesn't have any sidewalks, this allows for them to be able to have sidewalks. And we would prioritize, hey, where can we get the biggest bang for our buck? And let's put those together, and let's get those sidewalks in where we need to get them in, and then let's fix the ones that we need to fix. So that's not something the city's undertaken. We just said, hey, it's your problem, you fix it, and we'll cite you for it. And and you got to go spend thousands of dollars to do it. So I do think that is something we could do to get all of our different mini communities, if you will, within the city hooked together. So then you're not just walking around your development. You can walk anywhere you want in the city and do it safely.
I think there'd be a lot of people that really appreciate that. And I think the other component is a phenomenal idea. I know as a homeowner myself, I am not every day looking at my sidewalk and thinking, oh, what do I need to do to maintain this? Right. I am not going to address it until I'm told I have to. And then it's going to be a huge bill that I might not be prepared to have. So,
exactly.
Being more proactive about it, I think would be huge. And sharing some of that burden, I think would be huge too.
Hopefully that's how we can get something done with that. The other issue is traffic and trains, obviously. I will say that obviously we now have an overpass. We need to find a way to direct people to that when the train's blocking it for a while. I know we got flip down signs and things. I think I don't know, we have to investigate. There's got to be a better way to do that. And so we're not going to change Columbia Road as far as the trains go. At least they did give us ample notice this time. They're federally regulated, so you don't have
any say in it. Yeah,
you don't have any say at all. It's just, this is what we're going to do, and you guys are going to have to live with it. So, and the traffic issue, that's our biggest problem, is a lot of the traffic that's coming from south of us. We're on a state route, so we don't have jurisdiction on some of that.
State Route 252.
Yeah, 252. It's all the developments taking place in Columbia Station and Eaton Township and those places. That is the conduit to get to 480 in the morning. I mean, I've been backed up to Uncle John's. I get it. I understand it. Some of that's going to get resolved there is a study that'll be taking place for Columbia Road. Columbia Road's it won't be wide. It's not going to go to 4 lanes or anything like that, but it'll have turn lanes where the developments are. I don't think they're going to find it warrants traffic lights, but I don't know. They might. But I do think there's some things. When Clint Williams was around, downtown was pristine. It's still beautiful, but it's starting to get some rough edges. Some of the sidewalks need some work again. They're all brick and whatever. And the Williams Legacy properties are still being maintained, but parking is still a big issue. And I still think I don't have a solution in my back pocket at this point, but I do think there's some things that the city could probably do to alleviate some of the parking issues. So those are some of the things that I would be addressing once I'm back on council. See if there's some ways we can do some collaborative efforts or whatever to increase the amount of parking. I mean, we've got some great restaurants and things downtown.
Yeah.
As a local, we eat there during the week.
Well, yeah. And for me, we walk because we are fortunate enough to live that close. But we know exactly what you're talking about, right? We will, as long as the weather permits, we won't drive into downtown Olmsted Falls, especially on the weekends. We just walk.
Yeah. I mean, and that's beautiful. And that's kind of, even with the new housing and everything happening on Columbia Road right now, they can walk in the street or they can walk on the grass, but there's no sidewalks to take us.
Yeah. You get a little further south of where I am and the sidewalks disappear.
Yeah, exactly. So that's part of why we need that connectivity to get people, because it feeds our downtown area. I mean, it's critical to the development, and we want to keep the small town vibe. And I'm not saying we go commercialize everything. I don't think that's the case, but we need to keep that small town vibe but make it attractive so that people come in and make it easy for them to find a place to park. But even there, I think there might be some things we could even do with that. So, the old service garage then was a CrossFit place. And then I don't know if that's still for sale or not, but that would make a great area to put some parking or something else in. There's places, it's just kind of looking at it with maybe 10,000 foot aerial view and saying, okay, what can we do? Or let's develop a plan, that over time we could begin to develop those areas. They may not happen right away, but I've just always been kind of a planner, one of my philosophies is that 50 years from now, when I'm dead and gone, that somebody doesn't look back and say, "What the hell were they thinking?"
Yeah, your goal is for that not to happen.
Right. I want to do, let's do it right. Let's do it, maybe it costs a little more, maybe whatever, but let's do it right and make it appealing. It's just kind of one of those things. But
well, Garry, the last question I have is if you were to kind of more high level picture Olmsted Falls best possible version of itself. I'm sure you've touched on a lot of this throughout our conversation here, but what do you see differently about that vision of Olmsted Falls relative to today?
One of the things we're really lacking is recreational opportunities, especially for our kids. The schools do a pretty good job, but the city and the township don't really contribute much to that as far as ball fields. And I mean, don't get me wrong, there's a few here and there, but not like if you go to the communities, it's off the charts. And even I'm in a lot of places where I didn't expect that to even be the case. And it was like, wow, recreational complex and ball diamonds and workout facilities and all types of things. We don't have any of that. Connectivity, obviously being able to hook everything together, and just overall planning between the falls and the township. Even if the two never come together to be one, we need to plan together to still create that same community so that it appears to be one community, not two communities trying to do two different things. So
yeah, that would be, because we really are one community, the falls in the township. And
we are.
However you can strengthen that, I think would behoove everybody, whether or not it's a formal merger or just finding better ways to work together on things. Yeah.
Well, that's the first step. I think we just find ways to work together. And once we're all working together, if it makes sense, then at that point, hey, let's just become one. I think it becomes automatic. But
yeah,
first step is we need to talk with each other. And I spoke with the trustees yesterday at the Eagle Scout ceremony. And so I think once the new administration is in place, I think that's something that will certainly be something I'll be addressing, because we'll have a lot of different discussions with them on where can we work together and where are the challenges of working together, and how can we, even putting our safety forces together into a safety district, that could be done. That's not impossible to do. Police and fire, that could all be put together under one roof. So I don't know the exact structure of that, but you can create a fire in a police district. But there are ways. There are communities that are doing it. So it's not like we're recreating the wheel here. It's just we need to investigate those. How does it work? And if you put your mind to it, there's ways you can make it work. And maybe it shouldn't work, but let's at least
find out.
Find out. You need to investigate it, look at it, and does it make sense? And does it benefit our residents? I mean, first. That's the first foremost thing for government. I think that's the key. Recreation is big. And then how do we hook all that together? Because it doesn't really do us a lot of good if we have, recreation over here, but you can't get to it from there. And there's a lot of opportunities for that in certain places of the city. Although the problem is part of our land now is being developed. So we're losing some of those opportunities that we had before. So that's why I think we have to work with the township together to see if we can't do some of that. And some of the green spaces, there are places that I'm aware of that we could develop into little park systems or whatever and try to connect things together in a little better manner. So it's not just sidewalks, but there's other places where I think we could, just overall.
Well, Garry, is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you want to have an opportunity to speak to?
I just think we're probably one of the best kept secrets in Cuyahoga County. As far as a great place to live with great amenities. I just think we need to kind of step up some of the city services and provide some more things for our residents. Build on what we already have. I do think we have a very unique place, but then trying to showcase that to the rest of the world. Say, hey, this is a great place to live, and we'd also like to be a great place to work. And I just think that there's some opportunities that we have to do some things that haven't been done at a cost that we can afford. I mean, we've never been, I don't know, what do you want to call it? The Ritz-Carlton place,
Well, sure. Yeah.
The Hunting Valley or whatever, the mansion cities or anything like that. Most of us are a bunch of blue collar people mixed with white collar people. Our demographics are aging like most communities are. My whole street here, all of our kids are grown and gone, but we chose to stay here. I mean, some people leave because of the taxes, but other than that, that's, what we're getting, young people moving in. And that's refreshing to see. that we're getting a lot more younger people. And I think we need to make it attractive for them to want to live here, and then hopefully see if we can't find a way for them to work here also. So without raising taxes, let's work together and let's do it as efficiently and as effectively as we can. That's what government's there for, is to protect the people. After that, secondly, come the services. So, and then we've done that. That part we've done. I think everybody's pretty comfortable walking down the street, and they're not worried about, getting mugged or getting knifed, or, from that standpoint, I think we're doing great. But I do think there's places where we can improve. So, and then in small ways, I don't, like I said, I don't really see any big challenges as far as, major things that need to be done. I think we just need to tweak a few things, maybe do it a little better.
Well, Garry, thanks so much for being here. It was a great conversation. I appreciate your time, and good luck in the election.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Olmsted Overheard. If you missed any of my other election conversations, now's a great time to catch up. You'll find all of the episodes on the YouTube channel, or on the Facebook page, or on Spotify. Remember, Election Day is November 4th, next Tuesday. So above all else, go vote. I hope you've enjoyed my podcast so far. If you have, please subscribe, like, follow, share, and I'm excited to bring more topics to Olmsted Overheard after the election. My name is Mark McCausland, and this has been Olmsted Overheard.